This week, we're talking about Sudo and a potentially nasty security vulnerability, and then the French city that is dumping Microsoft products. There's news about Pipewire. There's news about Raspberry Pi and some new hardware. There's Rust drivers to cover and a lot more. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 210, recorded Saturday, July 5th. Bash to the future. Hey folks, it is Saturday and you know what that means. It's time for Linux. Get geeky with some open source news, some hardware, all kinds of fun stuff. It is not just me. I've got a couple of the guys with me today. We've got Mr. Rob Campbell and Mr. Ken McDonald. And I remembered your names again. There was that one show a few weeks ago that I couldn't remember it, and so I started singing the song about his farm, and then it came to me. But anyway, we've got some fun stuff. Rob is actually going to surprise us with a security story. That's usually my beat, but Rob jumped in and got it this time. And so what's up? It's kind of a big one around the Linux and the roots and all of that. What's going on?
It's a big tool in the Linux world. So a couple of new security vulnerabilities have been identified this week in Sudo, or Sudo, whichever way you want to say that. That can allow an unprivileged user to run any command they want under the right conditions, of course. But, I mean, don't panic. Most of you home Linux desktop users likely don't have much to worry about. But, you know, if you're running Linux devices that do allow others to log in, like maybe in a ch-rooted environment, or in an environment with like common sudo files among multiple Linux devices, you may want to listen up here. So the first vulnerability, Stratascale researcher Rich Murch, this vulnerability, he discovered it, and this first one is only scored with a CVSS score of 2.8, which is low because it's out of 10 we're talking about. This vulnerability is noted as CVE-2025-32462. So in 2013, the -H feature was added to Sudo that allowed users to list a user's pseudo privileges for a different host. But apparently, this feature makes it possible to execute any command allowed by the remote host to be run on the local machine as well when running sudo command, with the host option referencing an unrelated remote host. So I think if you have other people in your system, there's probably a way that they may be able to take advantage of that. I'd have to dig in and try to figure it out myself. But the second bug was also found by Rich. And this one is CVE-2025, because that's how they all start out, CVE- the year. And that's -32463 with a CVSS score of 9.3. So that's pretty high because we're talking out of 10, I said. So this is almost as severe as they get. So if you have users logging into a system in a chroot environment, you definitely want to make sure this one is patched. The vulnerability leverages the sudo's -r chroot option to run arbitrary commands as root, even if they are not listed in the sudoers file. Although the vulnerability involves the sudo chroot feature, it does not require any sudo rules to be defined for the user. So the default configuration options will allow for this. As a result, any local unprivileged user could potentially escalate privileges to root if a vulnerable version is installed. The bug allows a user to load an arbitrary shared library by creating an etc/ns or nsswitch.conf configuration file under the user's specified root directory, and then run commands with elevated privileges. So if you're relying on this feature, you may want to find a new option, as it has been suggested that this option will likely be removed from future releases. So these bugs, they were responsibly disclosed on April 1st and patched in Sudo version 1.9.17p1, which I think when I checked, I wasn't there yet. I updated on one of my Ubuntu servers, and it only updated to 1.9.15, I think. So it doesn't look like it. Maybe it's not available everywhere yet. But so find a way to not use those features if you have people on your systems, or find a way to get the updated Sudo version. So time to update Sudo and be on the lookout if you have shared environments for these kinds of abuses.
Yeah, interesting stuff. I didn't get a chance ahead of time to dig into this, and I'm now pulling up the openwall.com, the open source security list. This is where you're going to find some really good information on it. Sure. I'm trying to discover right now, because I've seen this worded in two different ways about the -H option. And in one case, it sort of seems like the local machine is using the permissions from a remote host, which would be really bad, or the local machine is allowing someone to do something on a different remote host, which is probably not intended, but not much of a security problem.
Well, it's kind of the same thing if they have access to the remote host. If you have access to both hosts, you could do it either way, probably.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, but I mean, so like, how many people actually use the host name portion of a Sudo, or is very specific? Almost everybody just uses, all/all. I couldn't even referring to the host name.
Yeah, I didn't, but
so I suppose that is for when you have what someone would use that for is essentially to have one sudo or file that gets distributed over a bunch of different hosts.
Yeah. Like what one of the things says, like if you have an environment of them and you have like a LDAP that it's common across a bunch of hosts. And
yeah, that makes sense.
Using the same sudoers file.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, interesting stuff. It is been fixed.
Just on an aside, if you want to check what version you have, what command would you use?
-v, sudo capital V. Yep.
I just did -- version, and it gave me mine.
Yeah, that's way too much to type. Just do a capital or a -capital V.
I knew it wasn't lowercase v because that does something else.
Verbose,
remember, Jonathan?
That's
probably verbose. Yep. Usually it's what it is if it's not version number.
In the sudo's case, it tells you sudo to prompt for the password.
Oh, okay.
Well, but that's what sudo does if you just run sudo. No, it's not. Okay. So what does sudo-v do exactly?
Well, I mean, sudo curious. By default does prompt for the password depending on how the sudoers file is configured, but
validate. The dash lowercase v is validate. It will update the user's cache credentials, authenticating the user if necessary. So you know how you can run a sudo command and it'll prompt you for your password, and then you can run the first time. You can run another command, sudo command, and if it's within the timeout period, it won't prompt you. You can run this and then run a sudo command and it won't prompt you because you validated.
Why would somebody want to do that though if they're already saved? It's like
I
want to see. I want to check if I really have permissions here again. Let's
maybe you've got a script that you need to prompt, and then you're still doing sudos, right? Continuous through that. So you do the sudo -v first, then the other sudo commands.
Yeah, that could be a point. But if I'm making a script and I have multiple sudos in there, why? If they're already putting their password in once, why would I want to make them do it over and over again?
You don't, but if you don't, otherwise it will, because it's each is in a subshell. Remember? I
mean, it depends upon how. That's true. Interesting. All right. Well, I think, Ken, you've got some goodies about another command line tool, or it's more than a command line tool now. What happened at the Pipewire Workshop 2025 this year?
Well, we can thank George. Let's see if I can remember how to say this. Kiagidakis. Yeah. But anyways, he wrote about the Calabora hosted Pipewire Workshop and Hackfest, where embedded recipes attendees got to meet with Pipewire developers and participate in direct discussions about the future of Pipewire. According to George, the agenda includes updates on video transport, Rust efforts, TSN networking, and Bluetooth support. Now, the day started with Win Taymans sharing his updates on video transport within Pipewire. Win's idea is to eventually build a system that allows routing video just like audio. We're definitely looking forward to that, aren't we, Jonathan? And he's wanting it with automated conversion to or from a common DSP format. He has already written a video converter that uses FFmpeg to convert between various video formats. Now, there is also a Vulkan-based converter available that you can use. The next step is to improve the format negotiation. Some applications, Firefox, for instance, seem to have very strange format requirements and expectations, making this next step difficult. Now, there was another discussion shared by Arun Raghavan's updates on the new Rust-based reimplementation of SPA and libpipewire. Arun's new library reimplements the Pipewire protocol in Rust, with its goal being to enable Rust clients to talk to the Pipewire daemon over the socket natively without calling into C libraries. There was also a discussion on time-sensitive networking, the TSN I'd mentioned earlier, in Pipewire, that was led by Alexej Rimpel, and I do apologize if I'm mispronouncing all these names. It talked about some issues with the current code that uses /dev/PTP as a clock source. I'm going to let y'all read more about that instead of trying to dig into the details with that discussion. But after lunch, Martin Greer discussed various issues that he and his colleagues have been seeing over time in both Pipewire and wire plumbing. Martin made some good points about specific areas in the code base that need more attention and improvement. Now, also discussed was the status of the work that Wim had started a while ago to expose multiple streams on nodes. Again, I'm going to let you read George's blog for more details about these and some of the other discussions that I didn't touch on, which includes discussions about GStreamer and Bluetooth.
One of the things reading through this that is very funny to see is that, two things. One, almost every time that you see someone talking about we do such and such with live video, the meme is they're using FFmpeg underneath the hood, and so you look here even at Wire Plumber and Pipewire, and yep, they use FFmpeg underneath the hood just like everything else. And then they call out Firefox in particular for having very strange format requirements for doing video handshakes and negotiation. And I've seen that too in some cases. So, interesting stuff.
Well, in my case, I'm kind of glad it does.
And sometimes that's what makes everything work. Yeah, Ken can only do this in Firefox for whatever reason. Audio and video is hard. We forget that sometimes because there's all these tools that try really hard to make it easy. But like trying to keep audio and video synced up and so that people don't desync and everything just works and it works on all the platforms, it's a really challenging problem. So, all right, let's see. What do we have next? Oh, yes. So one of the things that the story Ken just had was about moving Rust into Pipewire. Well, I came across a story this week about writing kernel drivers in Rust. Well, no, not kernel drivers, writing USB drivers in Rust. This came via Hackaday, and it is a story from Crescent Rose. It's a quick little how-to about how to take a new USB device that doesn't have a driver, use libUSB, which that is sort of libUSB is a bridge, you could say, between kernel space and user space. What's really interesting about it is you can run it in Windows as well. It is possible to do libUSB in Windows, but you can write a driver and you can put it in user space. You don't have to recompile your kernel to use it, and so you have a bunch of different devices that have driver support through this. And it's a how-to of you start from scratch, and in Rust, let's put together a user space driver for a USB device. And it's really good. And the crazy thing is that, like, by the end of it, he's got something that works fairly well in about 50 lines of Rust code, which is really cool. It handles interrupts. It's so this is like an RGB keyboard or something, and so all it does is it's just setting the color on the RGB once a second, and then reading a button. It's that level of stuff. But at the same time, you can make it work, and within just a few lines of Rust code. So if you've got some USB device out there and you've waited and wondered and you would love to have driver support for it, and nobody in the kernel seems to be doing it, well, maybe it's time to just roll up your sleeves and write some Rust code. It's all good.
How's your Rust journey going, Jonathan?
It got set aside. So I started learning Rust to do the Advent code calendar, and that was fun. And I got through like the first 2.5 days,
and then got distracted by real life.
Yeah, running a lot of C++ code these days. Not nearly as much Rust code, but
I looked at it once and thought this looks complicated.
I did like the Advent calendar of code. It was a good way to go about doing it because they started you off with some really simple problems. There's really good documentation out there for how to do it in a whole bunch of different languages. I liked that too because they actually used Cargo for like your package management inside the code challenge, and so it was really pretty slick to learn that way. And I wish I had more time to be able to go back and do it, but
yeah, I should do that sometime.
Yeah,
you need to get back to that Rusty journey.
Yes. I don't know. I've halfway joked and been telling people that I have about 5 jobs right now I'm trying to stay on top of, and it's not really that much of a joke. So we're not going to add Rust back into that pile yet. We're going to have to get rid of some of these first. I don't know when that's going to happen. I enjoy doing all of them too much.
When you hire somebody to help you,
I guess. I've got somebody in mind, but she is busy raising kids right now. So,
15 years.
Yeah, give it 15 years, then I'll get to help her. All right.
Or 4.
Oh, well, yeah, Rob, what's going on in France? And why do we care?
So the trend continues as more European countries as more European countries grow wary of relying on Microsoft and other American companies for their government infrastructure. So, there's a growing concern of privacy, digital sovereignty, government surveillance, or even the possibility of digital attacks, just taking down a system with an update or other undiscovered backdoors. I mean, even here in the US, we have many of the same concerns with hardware and things like that. So it's really a concern everywhere, it's not, and, not that I think these things are likely to happen, but, why would any government want their infrastructure to rely on software or hardware controlled by another government or, within another government within another country where that government could put some pressure and control on it, whether they do, will, or not. Who knows? You never know what political change could happen in the future. Unfortunately, some things are harder to replace than others. Like it would be almost impossible for every country to move all hardware manufacturing into their own borders. But software is far more easier for anyone to take control of. I could take control and bring software into my own house if I wanted. which is why the French city of Lyon, Lyon, or however the French would pronounce that, looks like Lyon to me, why they have taken a major step towards moving away from Microsoft software, starting by replacing Microsoft Office with open source alternatives such as OnlyOffice, which we've spoken about recently, and moving from Windows to Linux, which we speak about every week. Additionally, they have launched so I'm going to translate to English because I don't know how to say the French. In English, it's Open Digital Territory, but the French acronym is TNO. It's like territory, some word with the N in it that probably means digital, and then a word with the O that probably means open. So anyway, the TNO integrates tools such as Jitsi for video conferencing, Nextcloud paired with the OnlyOffice for document sharing and co-editing, Zimbra for email, and I should check that one out. I haven't heard of that one, but French like it apparently. Camilio for online training, and Matrix for instant messaging. The project has 2 million euros in funding from the French ANCT, another acronym that I'm not going to bother to figure out. You can look that up if you want, which is close to 2.5 million USD, about 2.3 something, I guess, and is already being used. So the TNO is already being used, according to them, by thousands of employees across several local governments in France. So even though this one city is moving towards it, there is this project that's really kind of getting spread out through a lot of French governments, apparently. All the news of governments moving to open source is going to make this, we seem to be bringing this up a lot lately. Pretty soon, this is not going to be newsworthy very fast. It's kind of like the old segments. Some have used to see a lot of shows and various things about when something runs on Linux. Oh, look what I found that runs on Linux. This runs Linux. Well, everything runs Linux now. So kind of like how everything runs Linux, it looks like at least all the governments over in Europe at some point are just going to be using Linux and open source alternatives also. So, whatever the reason, it's a good trend for open source.
Yeah. I like to see it. Did they say what Linux distro that they were looking at going with, or was it just a generic? We're going to dump Microsoft Windows for Linux.
Yeah, they didn't say.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
I'm going to make a stab and say either Slack or OpenSUSE.
You would hope, right? But
why Slack? OpenSUSE makes sense. That's a European one, but
where's the Slack distro out of?
I'm thinking it's a European country, isn't it?
I feel like no, but
Slack. Are we talking about Slackware?
Slackware, right? I mean, that's like one of the oldest distros out there, and
questionable whether it's still maintained, given that their last blog post was 2022. I think we've talked about this. So probably not Slackware. Yeah, this is interesting though. I kind of along those same lines. I hope what we don't have is what we had last time that European countries tried this, and they were essentially rolling their own distros or using these very weird, very niche distros. And it's like, no, just there's so many good ones now. Use one of the standards. Go talk to Canonical. Use Ubuntu. Use Debian even. Use Fedora. Although, if they're trying to get away from US influence, then Fedora might not be the one that they want to go with. But one could make the same argument about using the Linux kernel as well if US influence is really what you're trying to get away from.
Yeah, but on the plus side, you can break away and fork at any time. Once you feel like, oh, I don't trust them anymore, I'm taking it here and forking it, and so that's something you can't do with Windows or anything else.
Yep, that is true.
I can't find where Slackware is from. It was developed by Patrick Volkerding.
Slack, the communications application was founded in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Canadian, but that doesn't tell us anything about Slackware. I don't think they're related, are they?
They are not related.
I was going to say, I didn't think so. Anyway.
Volkerman sounds German, or Volkerding sounds German, but and OpenSUSE is apparently based off of it. So
did not realize that.
OpenSUSE, I guess, according to Wikipedia. So there's a lineage there that maybe makes sense.
Yeah. Well, they're certainly going to get away from running on US made hardware too. So maybe they're going to go with the Raspberry Pi.
That's quite possible.
That was a segue, kid.
Or would you rather use the RP2350-Pi0?
So what is this? I saw this week. What is this thing?
Take it away, old McDonald.
According to Giorgio Mendeza, who wrote about it this week, it's Waveshare's embedded platform with a form factor similar to the Raspberry Pi Zero. And as I said, it's called the RP2350-Pi0. It is powered by the RP2350 microcontroller and includes a DVI interface for displays and a lithium battery connector for portable hardware applications. Now, according to Giorgio, the RP2350-Pi0, I'm going to shorten that to Pi0 for the rest of this, but it is built around the RP2350B microcontroller and uses a dual-core, dual architecture design. In other words, 2 ARM Cortex-M33 cores alongside 2 Hazard-3 RISC-V cores. That sounds like it'd be interesting to play with. They're both running at up to 150 megahertz with dynamic architecture switching. Try saying that one 3 times fast. The product page notes that the DVI output can drive most HDMI screens, and the board supports USB host or device mode via the onboard PIO-USB port. Storage is available through a micro SD card slot near the standard 40-pin GPIO header. Now, Waveshare provides example demos on its wiki pages that highlight the board's capabilities. The Pi0 development board is available now for $9.99 on the Waveshare website. And I got a feeling that just calling it a Pi0 may become easier.
No, that is very confusing, actually, because the Pi0 already exists. There is, in fact, okay, so this is not the board that you're talking about, but this is a Waveshare board. I happen to have one of these within reach. This is a Waveshare display module. It is made for the Pi0 because Raspberry Pi already makes a little board with that same form factor. And what Waveshare has done here, which is really intriguing, is they're taking the RP2350, which that is that's the newest, I think, chip from the Raspberry Pi embedded line, and they're putting it on the Pi0 form factor, which is crazy. I sort of have to ask myself, like, why haven't Raspberry Pi done this?
Yeah.
Cost?
I can't imagine that the cost would be. I mean, Raspberry Pi already makes the 2350 in-house. Making the board to put it on, they already make boards in-house. Adding another spin board is nothing. It's just odd to me that nobody at Raspberry Pi thought of this, unless it is we don't want to confuse people by putting out another board that's so different using that same form factor and pin out like that might. So and this 2350 board from Waveshare. You don't run Linux on it. It is embedded hardware. You use something like Platform IO or the Arduino environment, or maybe there is a way to run Zephyr on this. Real-time OS, RTOS. That's the sort of thing that you run on this, not a full Linux distro. A lot of these little cores, like, you can't. In fact, there have been a couple of really crazy stories of people running Linux on boards like this by emulating a virtual CPU, and that's the only way to do it, because the CPU does not actually have the right extensions to be able to run Linux as it is. So you've got to build a virtual CPU on the one that you have and then boot Linux on that. And, boot time is measured in days at that point because everything is so slow. But yeah, people have done it. It's crazy. It's fun stuff.
Basically, it's using MicroPython.
You can run MicroPython on it. That's not the only thing that you can do on these.
Looks like another one's C-Blink or C_Blink.
Yeah, probably. I interviewed on Floss Weekly back 2 weeks ago, I think, guys that were taking the Elixir runtime and running it directly on these. And so that's Erlang. That's the big Ericsson. It was written for big iron telecommunication stuff, and they're like, well, let's just re-implement the virtual machine on embedded devices. It'd be fun. Oh my goodness, you guys are crazy. It's really cool what they're doing.
So if we're done with this topic, let's back up to the last one here. I got to finish off, clean the air out on this, on where Slackware is from. I had to dig into this a little bit. It wasn't that hard, actually. I was looking at the Wikipedia for Slackware and I couldn't find it. So I'm like, well, let's just click on the developer to see where he's from. And I am proud to say he is from the United States. Well, I don't know about from or not, but he went to college in my state, Minnesota, at Minnesota State University, Moorhead. So that's like less than 250 miles away from me, which I know for you people over in England sounds like, all the way across the country, but that's really close here in the U.S. So in 1993, he graduated there. And then a year later, he made Slackware. And the rest is history. He's 58 years old. I don't know where he's at now. He's married to Andrea, and go check out his wiki page.
There you go.
Wikipedia page. But yes, so that makes it a U.S. I mean, I have no idea if he still lives here, but that makes it a U.S., in fact, a Minnesota product.
It's a Minnesota project. Yeah, there you go. Azure Flash reminds me that it was Atom VM is the Erlang project that re-implements the virtual machine there. And they do some very cool stuff. Sticking with Raspberry Pi, there is something else new. This one is not from Waveshare, though. There is something new this week from Raspberry Pi themselves. And it's also not running Linux. Raspberry Pi has announced the Pi Radio Module 2, and it is on sale for a whopping $4 a piece. And I will tell you, this is super interesting. We're going to get there, but first, let me tell you what this thing is actually doing and what it's for. It is a little tiny embedded radio that gives you Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and that's it. That is all it is. It is their little spin on the Infineon CYW43439. And it's a PCB with this radio on top of it and then a CAN on top of that. And, you can make a design that takes this exact footprint and then build this little PCB, drop it on there, solder it in, and you get radio, right? You can have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on your device, which is cool. Like, the ability to do that is really neat. But this is really fascinating to me because they're making this thing available commercially, and so you can buy it. They're releasing a data sheet for it. You can buy it from places like SparkFun, it looks like, and some others. And so this is going to be a commercially available product. And I tell you why that's so interesting to me, and that is because they also have the RP. Well, they have the RP1 and the RP2. I think it's the RP1 is the one that I'm really, the RP1. This is something that's been intriguing to me for a very long time. This is their chip. It's like an I/O expander, really, but it takes the name of it, not NVMe, the PCI Express. It takes a PCI Express lane and breaks it out into essentially the 40-pin header on the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so something that some of us that do embedded work have really wanted to see for a long time is essentially the RP1 chip on a desktop-sized expansion board, because all of our desktops have these PCI Express lanes. You could steal a PCI Express lane and then have essentially a 40-pin, and they could do support for it in the Linux kernel, and you would have the ability to have a 40-pin Raspberry Pi header on a desktop or a laptop. Like, that would be very cool. So I want to see that, and to make that happen, either Raspberry Pi themselves has to come out with it, or they have to make the RP1 available. And this story about the Wi-Fi chip really intrigues me, because it is a step in the direction of Raspberry Pi is thinking about making all of their special chips and things available for people to use in other projects. And so maybe we have a future in front of us where we get to do some of these really cool things with, chips like the RP1. I would love to see that. That would be very cool. It would be super cool.
No. Now, with the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi radios, they're pretty much fixed. You wouldn't be able to reprogram the frequencies they use, would you?
I would imagine. So here's the thing. A lot of these little chips anymore are, they're software-defined radio. But a lot of them anymore also are very difficult to put firmware on. Like, you can only run signed firmware. So, like, is it physically possible to reprogram this thing to be able to get access to a few other frequencies or, other protocols? Probably, technically. But is anyone going to actually be able to do it? Probably not. And I don't know how this is implemented, how low level it is. I don't even think that they specify, what protocol it talks over. It's probably something like MDIO, I think, is one of the ones that's typical for these things to talk over. It could be SPI, it could be I2C. I mean, who knows? I can try to find out, but
so it probably would not be the option if you wanted to use a Raspberry Pi to replace an old radio remote control.
Probably not. No, probably can't do that.
And I don't know if I've got the patience to mess with ESP32.
Oh, it's fun though. I very much enjoyed my trip into the embedded world and writing things in C++ for embedded. It's fun. You occasionally run into undocumented bugs where things like standard sort,
undocumented features.
When standard sort causes crashes on embedded, but it works just fine on your Linux desktop, I wouldn't call that a feature.
That's a 0 day.
Spontaneous reboots of your embedded devices is not a feature. No, not for me.
Microsoft calls those features,
I guess. All right, Rob, there's been some Fedora news.
This there has been. But one more clarification. Volker didn't graduate in 93, and Slackware was initially released in July of 93. I was skimming real fast, and the 1994 thing was the fact that he had attended 75 Grateful Dead concerts by April of 1994. So apparently he's a big Grateful Dead fan.
It's put it on the resume. Ship it. Central part of his CV.
Now that we're done talking about Slackware, let's talk about Fedora. Fedora. Oh, wow. I was combining words there. I was going to say Fedora on their radical move to another radical move. I said Fedora and yeah. Anyway, as far as radical moves, most people think Arch is known for being the distro on the bleeding edge. But Fedora is a distro known for pushing the limits, cutting off the old, and aggressively moving into the new. Our Arch just keeps on rolling, and Fedora actually pushes things forward. This week, they're stepping back from one of their radical steps forward that they were going to do, and replacing it with another potentially radical idea. Fedora had planned to drop all 32-bit support in an upcoming Fedora 44 release. But this led to a significant backlash and a lot of disapproving feedback from the community. Fedora Engineering Steering Committee member Fabio Valentini, after all this feedback, has withdrawn the proposal and acknowledged the backlash, stating the target for this change was too early, and pointed out that the technical problems mentioned in the proposal are, they're not going to go away. And he even apparently said that, he didn't think it was going to go through anyway. So guess that one's going down for now, not going to happen. So the new radical proposal this week is to drop UEFI boot support on MBR partition disks. Specifically, we're talking about the x86-64 system, starting with the upcoming Fedora 43 release. They believe this will simplify the installer code and will end support for boot configuration a boot configuration that is rarely used, inconsistently implemented across firmware configs, and not even officially tested by Fedora. So pushing out untested code? I don't know. But anyway, I guess this helps Fedora devs, but what does this do for the users? Well, apparently the setup can cause the bootloader to crash, adding to its list of problems. So that's what it does for users. Make sure it's not going to crash for you. Existing users, those who already have it set up, it'll just going to keep on working if you keep updating. But what this does affect is new installations done via their Anaconda installer, where GPT would be required instead of MBR for UEFI boot. That's what this would, who that would affect. This also doesn't affect ARM or RISC-V architectures. So apparently, according to what they think, it is not going to affect many users. One radical move to the next. I say we need a distro that pushes limits. Cut out that 32-bit support. Just get rid of it, and drop that UEFI support on GPT MBR systems. Whatever it is, it's Linux. If you don't like it, there are many other distros to hop to. But having a distro that pushes things forward will help push the entire ecosystem, the entire community forward. And allow us all to have nice things.
I have a slightly different take on this, in both of them slightly different. And then there's one other thing that Fedora talked about dropping, that adding in this case, that they have not added. So the installer thing, the UEFI on MBR, that is strictly at install time. So
Yes.
if you already have one of these systems, it's going to continue to work. It's just this slightly odd combination is now not going to be offered at install. And if you're really a wizard and you know what you're doing, you can still install it that way. I promise it's still possible in one way or the other. So nobody's really losing out on anything. I am not aware of anybody that has this killer edge use case that I've got to have UEFI and MBR on the same system.
If you're radical enough to run that kind of configuration, you're radical enough to make it work.
Yes.
And you've got limited storage space because of it.
Yeah, and then the other thing with the 32-bit libs, 32-bit is not supported anymore by a lot of these upstream programs. And so that's the kicker. This is not really Fedora pushing this. This is every other program that Fedora ships pushing back against it and saying, we don't support running as 32-bit anymore. So many distros have moved away from the ability to install 32-bit, strictly. And so this sort of multi-lib support where you've got the 32-bit packages installed alongside is just kind of an oddball configuration. It is causing problems for users, and it is not supported by much. Now, the problem with dropping it is that so many games are specifically 32-bit. And it makes me wonder if we're going to see an emulation layer pop up that will let you run 32-bit binaries on a 64-bit system and not have to do all of these extra installs.
Or do we already have one?
I am not aware of one, but I would not be surprised if it was out there. I want to say I've looked for this a time or two, and have not found one. I know Steam. So, like for example, Steam has Soldier, I think is what they call it, and that is their little Linux runtime. And so that might be enough to give you 32-bit game support if you're running stuff in Steam.
Yeah, and in the ITFOSS or itsfoss.com article, they talk about Fedora-based distros like Bazite, which is specifically kind of designed for gaming. Apparently, they have a higher reliance on the 32-bit.
Yeah, I think one of the main takeaways, and I can't remember where I saw this, but it was one of the Fedora guys talking about it. One of the main takeaways is this is inevitably going to happen, and in fact, it's also inevitably going to happen to all of your major distros. And so the fact that we're talking about it now is a good thing, because it'll get some solutions going. People will start thinking about it, and there will then be some of those libraries
and that's why I say cut the cord, get people thinking about it faster.
Yeah, well.
How does that affect Flatpaks that would include 32-bit libraries with themselves?
Yeah, that's kind of iffy on all of this stuff. Like, where is that layer going to be where you can have a 32-bit talking to a 64-bit? How far down the stack to say? Because obviously, like at some point, it works to run 32-bit stuff on a 64-bit kernel. But how much of the user space do you have running 64-bit? Or running 32-bit for a 32-bit application to be able to talk to it.
I imagine a lot of that's embedded into Flatpak, but I don't know.
Yeah, you would think so. I don't remember having to install a whole bunch of 32-bit libraries to be able to get Flatpaks running. So apparently it sort of handles all that internally.
I could see Snap doing it easier.
Very possibly. Yeah. There was one other thing that we should quickly mention that was a Fedora 44 probably proposal that got shot down, and that was Ex Libre, the replacement X11 fork. Someone was trying to include it, and there was just an outcry of no, we are not going to do this for various reasons.
Did we not talk about that last week?
I don't think we talked about it in Fedora.
No, okay.
I thought we'd touched on it when somebody talked about Ex Libre itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It does not belong in Fedora. I have a reason that is different from a lot of the other people's reasons. I think just technically speaking, it does not belong there.
Since you're speaking about an X11 server, is there another possibility?
There is. Is it time for this story? It is time for Ken.
Let's go way back now.
Yeah, turn on the Wayback machine. If Ken did not grab this one, I was going to. So, Ken, let's go back, way back.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you, Liam Proven, for writing about a new project that addresses one of the biggest differences between how X11 and Wayland work. Now, this project is by Aradny Kernel, and I apologize because I know I'm messing that name up. But she's one of the core Alpine Linux developers. The project is called Wayback. Now, according to Liam, Wayback bridges some of the gaps and the disagreements between the brave new world of Wayland and the decades-old X11-based desktop environments. Now, quoting from the project's README file, Wayback is an experimental X compatibility layer which allows for running full X desktop environments using Wayland components. It is essentially a stub compositor which provides just enough Wayland capabilities to host a rootful X Wayland server. Now, Liam's article does a great job of giving a brief explanation and use of an X server, so I'm going to recommend that you do check that description and history out. His article also does a great job of pointing out that Wayland is just a protocol, and there are no separate display servers for managing Windows. Instead, you have a compositor that combines the X11 functions of window management and the display server. Liam states, Wayback is an effort to create a Wayland-based display server, X11 style, which does not provide compositing. It aims to provide just enough support to run Xwayland full screen and thus provide the underpinning so that you can start a traditional X11-based window manager or desktop environment. For Liam's thoughts on why this project is coming out now, I again recommend reading his informational and entertaining article that I have linked in the show notes. One last question for everybody. What does this project, the Internet Archive, and the cartoon Rocky and Bullwinkle have in common?
They all use the term the Wayback machine. But I don't remember exactly with Rocky and Bullwinkle, but I think there was a Wayback something or other.
Well, it was one of the other cartoon skits, I guess would be the best way to put it, that was part of the Rocky and Bullwinkle. So Mr. Peabody
yes,
invented a Wayback, a WABAC, and I'm going to have to go back
I think the Internet Archive borrowed that name to name their Wayback.
Yeah.
Correct. In fact, Liam points that out.
Yeah.
What they all have in common is they take you back in time.
Indeed. So
but the time machine he created was called the Wormhole Activating and Bridging Automatic Computer. WABAC.
Somebody really wanted their name to spell out Wayback. This story is really interesting to me because it's not the first time that someone has done this. And there is a couple of blog posts from back in 2023 with Xwayland in rootful mode, which is essentially the same idea. I don't know if you guys remember this, but it was running rootful. So running Xwayland with root enabled. I don't think that's the root user. I think that's as the root compositor is more what that's getting at. And this was progress being made towards getting an X11 desktop running underneath Wayland. And they're both doing basically the same thing, probably going about it in slightly different ways. But yeah, it's cool to see. It's neat to see because there's some of these old desktops that would be nice to be able to still run. Some of them people really enjoy that are not ready for Wayland, and having other ways of going about it is pretty cool.
And it may make it easier for some of them to actually transition to Wayland.
Mm-hmm. Yep, very possible. Very possible.
Or at least to get rid of X.
Yes. All right.
But would they be getting rid of X if they did this?
Sort of, mostly parts of it.
I mean, X itself would be getting rid of it. It's pretty much like what Xwayland is, except for a little deeper.
It's rootful. All right, so
all the way to the roots.
Yeah, that deep. There's a couple of interesting updates from programs that you may have thought were done. You know, there comes a point in the lifetime of something when it's done and you don't get any updates anymore. Well, here's some things that are apparently not done. Bash. We got the Bash 5.3 release. There's a couple of interesting things in here. There's a new form of command substitution, which is not something I play with very often, but it's in there. It adds the reply shell variable when the command substitution is complete. That's neat. Bash 5.3 also gets updates for C23, the newest iteration of the C programming language. It has a read line as a new option for case-insensitive searching. Glob sort, a local variable that apparently will let you know how shell is going to sort results of a path name completion. Very interesting stuff. Now, there is one thing that's intentionally broken, and that is that with the C23 conformance, Bash no longer compiles under the old school KNR C compilers. So you can't take Bash 5.3 and go compile it for your Univac or your PDP-11 or whatever you're trying to run it on. That it will run Unix, won't run this anymore. So Bash is moving into the future. But anyway, there's some fun stuff there in Bash 5.3. And then the other one that I saw, very much along the same lines, is Perl. Perl 5.42 is out this week, and it's got Unicode 16 support. I didn't even know Unicode was versioned. Oh my goodness. Unicode is such a pain to work with. Experimental features like any and all operators for working with lists, a writer attribute for field variables, more core subroutines, various stuff that makes lots of sense to Perl programmers, but I've not done anything with Perl for a decade now. It's been a long time since I've done anything with Perl. Let's just say that when I went and did the code challenge, it was not Perl that I reached for.
Perl was my first language that I ever learned way back, let's see, 6 years ago. And that was basically, at the time, Perl was a very common thing to do a CGI scripting on the web.
I've written some CGI websites, very, very simple ones.
So does this mean we need a new version of a good Perl reference book?
I don't know. I'm sure there are Perl 5 reference books out there, and I doubt that 5.42 is enough changes to require a whole new book. I'm sure somewhere.
If you are an author of the Perl and a Perl series, now may be the time to release another one, make some more money.
The authors of the Perl series that I am aware of have all moved on to other languages. That's the thing.
I think our favorite author moved on to Go and Flutter.
Yep. Randall Schwartz is off in the Flutter Dart world doing fun stuff there.
I was really only a Perl user for maybe a year or two, and then I moved on to PHP pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's very similar-ish.
PHP always reminded me of C. I always felt like I was writing interpreted C code when I was writing PHP. Didn't feel that way with Perl, but with PHP. And it's the silly stuff, like the way you use brackets reminded me so much of C. Not necessarily the rest of the syntax, but just there's a lot of PHP stuff, particularly doing very simple programs that are very C-like. So maybe that's why I enjoyed PHP. So I always like C and C++. Good languages, fun languages. All right.
Definitely a lot different than assembly.
Yes. Although you can make assembly programming look and work a lot like C.
Or like BASIC.
Probably not like BASIC. But you can make your assembly look a lot like C. In fact, that's sort of how C started, was just a whole bunch of macros on top of assembly. Anyway, let's move on to some command line tips. And Rob is going to start us off with some Proxmox goodness.
Yes, not a command line tip, at least not today. So I think I'm going to start a Proxmox series here because, one of the things when I do have my free time and I want to, play around with some technology, I have some Proxmox servers sitting around that I run things on. So sometimes when I got some time, I'm just going out looking for new ways I can use it and new things I can do with it and new things in my home lab and whatever else can improve. So one of the things that help me monitor and see the efficiencies and inefficiencies of certain things is a program called Pulse. So this is a Pulse monitoring system. So for those watching, I have it up on my screen. This is Pulse, and it's showing I have two different Proxmox servers, PV1 and just PVE, I guess, and PV2 in my cluster. And you can't see all my servers. You can see my first PV server. But if you look there, after I installed this on my Proxmox, it's right down. Where is it? Oh yeah, it's down here in the other. It's a LXC container, which you can't see it because it's on the second server, way down below. But one of the things you may notice here is, and one of the things that I really noticed, I always knew containers were more efficient than a whole VM. I didn't really realize how efficient. If you look down here, the LXC containers are using so much less memory than the VMs up here, where you have gigs of use. And, down in the containers, we're looking at megs, 100 to 200 megs of use. So, utilizing this, I've been going through and converting lot of my VMs into containers. Well, not a lot. You can see there's only like a few here, but I'm still working on that. I plan to move more and more of them into containers because so much better efficiency. But with this, you could see the you got the name, you got the type of VM or LXC container, got the ID, you have the uptime, which I got one of my VMs 527 days of uptime. You got your CPU usage, your memory usage, your disk usage, and the VMs on here. It just shows how much is provisioned for it. Where the containers actually shows how much is provisioned and how much of that is used. So that's kind of nice. And then you can see the read, write, net in, net out stuff as it cycles through. And you can filter different ways. But then you can also go over, at the top, there's tabs. You can tab over to the storage and look at all your storage you have attached to it. You can look at your backups. I don't have a whole lot on there, just some of the important stuff. And I got to figure something out here because I do have PBS, which is the Proxmox backup appliance. It's its own thing. It's more efficient than the built-in deduplication, all kinds of stuff like that. Those aren't showing up here. And they're also not showing up under my PBS tab. So I must have something not quite right there. I've been using this probably several weeks, maybe a month. I don't know. But either way, on the backups tab, if you're not using PBS, it's going to show you your snapshots, your PVE backups. If you are using PBS and it's working rightly, it should show that there. Recent failures, all that stuff there. So Pulse is it's a nice, simple tool. There's a script. Sorry,
Goodness,
a script. There's a script I'm going to show probably next week or whenever, a way to install this, along with a lot of other nice, easy ways to install things. So there you go. Pulse to monitor Proxmox servers.
nothing to do with audio in this case.
No,
Not that kind of pulse.
Nope.
All right. Very cool. Ken, you've got a grep tip for us, right?
Oh, yeah. I originally covered the basic use of grep back in episode 27. So if y'all want more detailed information about the ways you can use grep, I'd recommend going back and listening to that one. I don't think there's any video with that one, in fact. But today, I wanted to demonstrate how you can use grep contact line control to pull out information from a long output like you may get when using pwdump or pw-cli info all. In fact, let me go ahead and transition to my terminal. Everybody remembers when I did pw info all and how much memory or information came out of that about your Pipewire configuration, so much that you can't even scroll all the way back. But you can, of course, pipe that into grep, and let's make sure that's a P, not a big embrace, and put in the string that you're looking for. Let's say you're looking for ALSA underscore output. And you can do that. And there it goes. Now, with just doing that, you'll notice that it's given me two lines here that are error lines. That's going to your standard error, so that they show up, as well as the line that grep filters out of the other stuff. So the command that I've started using uses redirection. Little benefit here.
Yeah, it
followed by grep.
Redirects standard error into your standard output.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then you can use a -F, which tells it to just use fixed strings. And grep, the man page for grep recommends putting those within single quotes. And then you can do a -A, capital A that is, to look after the line. So for those of y'all listening, I just did pw-cli info all, 2 greater than symbol, &1, then the pipe command, grep capital F, capital A, and then in quotes, I've got 15, and I'll explain why that's in double quotes in a minute, followed by, in single quotes, ALSA _ output. The output of that had ALSA output in red with the next 15 lines after that being displayed. Now, if I go in and take away the quotes, what do you think is going to happen for that 15?
I would think it would do the same thing.
It may or may not, depends. Now, you can do B to get the 15 lines before. But depending on the version of Bash you have, it may just take the 1 and drop the 5 or give an error because of the 5. The reason being is another way you can do it is instead of putting a or B, you can just put a dash followed by the number. And that's where it could get confusing, because if you put a 1-5, you think, what do you think is going to happen?
It's going to see the 1 and it's going to throw an error on the 5. No, it did see it. I expected it to get confused with that one, but it did not.
I was expecting that too. I think it's because I've got a later version of Bash.
Some versions of Bash are smart enough to realize that all goes together, and others are not.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or another way you can do that is capital C. In there. And then
Context.
You can scroll back. Correct. It says basically put that in the center. Now, another one that I'm going to recommend using is, and I'm going to put this before these because it takes a double dash, group, get my fingers on the right keys here, dash, separator, equals, and here I'm going to use double quotes without that space between the double quote and equal.
Mm-hmm.
Dash dash separator, make sure I spell that right, followed by 2 dashes. Then put a space between that last quote and the FC. And let's go with something that's going to give me more than just a 1 output. Like, say, ALSA dash. Now we've got input and output. And you'll see it puts that separator in there, so you can tell where each one is.
Each block begins.
That way it makes it a little bit easier.
That's handy. I like that.
And with that, you could then go in and say, for example, say I wanted to do ALSA input. Control-Shift-C to copy that. And then I can come back down here and paste that in. And I've only got the 1. And then you can go in and with that 15 work out. So you can find, well, that got us the end of this. Oh,
because you're adding 10 more lines of output to the beginning and the end of it.
Right. But you still don't have the beginning of it because you're looking for the ID line for the beginning. So let's go ahead and double that. To 50. And that should grab it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Yep.
Yeah, there it is.
And so that we're dealing with a node that doesn't have any input ports at the moment, has 2 output ports, and its ID is 51. So that way you can get that information out and also look through and see what all that does.
Yeah, you can tame that crazy spew of information from the Pipewire command.
From the unimaginable to almost manageable.
Yeah.
Because that's still a lot of information just for that one node, isn't it?
It is. But yeah, great stuff. All right. I am going to attempt a screen share as well. Let's see if we can make this work. Ba-dum-bum, ba-dum-bum. Yeah, there we go. All right. So I've got I've got an interesting command that I've been playing with, and it is it's contact. And so this is actually one of the Meshtastic guys has written this. It is a command line client for Meshtastic. And it's kind of like being in an old school IRC chat room. You can send test messages, you can chat with folks. And so there it's going to show that you hear my devices behind me dinging at me because the live demo is actually live in this case. But one of the other really neat things that this has is support for going in and doing all of your configuration. So, if you wanted to go in and configure channel 1, change the password, turn on MQTT, all of that stuff. It's just it's a really nifty interface to be able to play around with Meshtastic if that's something that you want to do. And of course, that's something that I want to do almost all of the time. And so that's why I find it pretty interesting. Go hit the button, make it shut up. It's a problem with being a developer. I'm surrounded by nodes and I send a message and they all start dinging at me at once.
I was going to ask if you're just going to leave that running the rest of the show.
No. I would drive me nuts. Would not be able to do that. But anyway, Contact is a cool little program. You can install it with pipx. Pipx install Contact, I think, is all it takes to do it. The cool thing about maybe I should do pipx as a command line tip at some point in the future, because that sets up your virtual environment for you so that you can install pip commands. You can install Python commands using pip without breaking the rest of your system. That's always cool. Yeah. So that is Contact.
So that was like IRC on there. Can you actually chat with other people then?
Yeah, if you've got
like
other
IRC. So
well, it's for Meshtastic.
With Meshtastic, right?
Yeah, you can chat. You can chat with folks on your local mesh.
So where if I was closer and had a Meshtastic connected to you, we could chat.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah, it is. It's fun. It's fun, and I really like the old school terminal interface there. It's something the project has needed. It's great. It's a great add-on.
I miss IRC. I'd tell you my favorite IRC client from back in the day, but the word isn't necessarily appropriate.
I remember this. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your discretion.
Another one was, I want to say, Trillium.
Oh, there's a bunch.
No, mine was command line though. MIRC is one if you want a GUI, but GUI's boring.
GUIs are boring. Yup, it's true. All right. Well, we're going to let the guys plug whatever they want to. We'll start with Rob. I'm sure he's got a website and some other stuff to tell you about.
Don't give away my surprise. If y'all want to come and see more about me, connect with me, see what kinds of things I'm talking about on the social webs, you can find me at robertpcampbell.com. That's ROBERTP. Then Campbell, CAMPBELL.com. And on that page, at the top, you'll find links to my LinkedIn, my Twitter, my Blue Sky, Mastodon, and a place to donate coffees in $5 increments if you appreciate what I do for you. That's it. Did we lose Jonathan? So,
of course not.
Now that I am the star of the show, as always, I don't know. I've said all the things I had to say, but
hey,
okay.
Here we go. I'm back. That was weird. I got a little pop-up that said connection lost, and I could still hear you guys. And I was pushing on the button, like, get Rob off of full screen. We've got another Rob full screen. Sorry.
Similar to what was happened to me last week when I was trying to start Restream.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you remember that time. I think it got stuck on Jeff when Jonathan's crashed, and that was for a good, 5 minutes or so. But.
Yeah. All right, Ken, you have anything to plug?
Yes, I do. And this week, I wanted to go back to using Linux on a Chromebook by plugging How to Geek's senior editor's Patrick Campanel's list of 9 applications he enjoys using on his Chromebook. I've got that link posted in the show notes. I found it an interesting read, and I'll have to admit, most of the apps he uses, I like using on my Chromebook.
Very cool. All right. Appreciate you guys being here. We appreciate everyone that is here catching us live and on the download. I want to let you know about 2 things. First off, you should go check out Hackaday because that's the other place you can find me. My security column goes live there on Friday mornings, and that's also where we do Floss Weekly these days. Show about free Libre and open source software. We record that on Tuesdays, and it goes live on Hackaday on Wednesdays. You should check it out. The other thing that you should check out is Club TWiT. I've got a button here to press that will hopefully give you a QR code. Let's see if it works. But Club TWiT is, there's the QR code. That way. It's over that way. Over on the other side of Rob. Scan the QR code, join the club. It's price of a couple of cups of coffee per month, and it is definitely worth it. You should come and check it out. Be part of the club. It's where the cool kids are. We appreciate everybody that is in Club TWiT. It's the best way to support the network and your favorite shows. We will be back next week. We hope you have a great week, and we will be back to talk about more Linuxy goodness. So until then, take care.
Hey, buddy, are you a geek? Are you a tech enthusiast? Then I would love to invite you to join a tech community like no other. You can gain exclusive access to our incomparable quality tech content with Club TWiT. As a member, you'll enjoy all TWiT TV shows ad-free, plus access private video feeds for insider shows like iOS Today, Home Theater Geeks, and so much more. Dive into the members-only TWiT Plus bonus feed for behind-the-scenes content, club discussions, and special events. But here's the best perk. Join our incredible Discord community to watch live show productions, chat with hosts, and participate in exclusive members-only activities. It's your backstage pass to the world of TWiT. Whether you're a tech enthusiast or a lifelong learner, Club TWiT elevates your knowledge while entertaining your interests. Get 2 weeks free when you sign up now and unlock unparalleled access at twit.tv/clubtwit. That's twit.tv/clubtwit. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you and welcome to the club.